Hey everyone, welcome back to the American Justice Podcast. I am your host, C. Derick Miller, and over there on the other side of internet land, on the other side of Dallas is, go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
I am Scott Pokensey.
Good to hear your voice, Scott. How's everything going?
It's going well. It's going well. I'm just getting. I'm so excited. I can't even tell you at the momentum that this podcast is gaining. It's absolutely blowing me away. Like, I'm getting so many comments, and just everybody's just telling me, good job, and they're enjoying the story and that kind of stuff, and it makes all the hard work that goes into it worth it.
Yeah, what is it Joaquin Phoenix did in Gladiator, where he'd hold his hand out and then he'd just slowly give that thumbs up? Yeah, I'm surprised too, but we're giving the people what they want. People love true crime, and this is a very interesting case that had a very horrible outcome. But I guess the outcome is yet to surface. This is still ongoing. We're trying our best here, and hopefully a lot of our listeners out there and viewers, people who view both our Q&As and the weekly episode on YouTube, hopefully that's something that they know can come to light and change the outcome of this whole thing. All this time later, I'm sure he doesn't care. I'm sure Brandon's like, I don't care if it's been 15 years or what. Let's get this out.
Yeah, I've always been of the opinion that there's somebody out there somewhere that knows something. And that's kind of the whole point of all of this, is to get it out there in the public and get people to learn about the case. And then, someone tells someone and someone tells someone else. And the next thing you know, somebody remembers something that they had just either forgotten, or maybe they were too afraid to come forward before. But now that it's been a long time, maybe they're not as afraid, and maybe they're willing to tell what they know. And I can't really go into details, but that actually kind of did happen a few weeks ago, and that information has been turned over to the attorney, and hopefully that'll be part of what goes into the filing when they do file his writ finally.
That's great. Well, let's jump into our very first question here. Let me get comfortable. Did you see my shirt?
I did not.
I have on a Weyland-Yutani shirt from the Alien franchise. I know you're not big into movies. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the Alien movies.
Well, not.
But
it's like a double negative, because I'm not really into like watching a lot of movies, but I'm definitely not into watching a lot of science fiction, which is really weird because I've seen all the Star Wars. But I think that's different, because I saw it when I was like 5 and kind of got addicted to it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Weyland-Yutani was yet another government agency that didn't care about people's health and wanted them to break quarantine. So I'm wearing this T-shirt in honor of the ways of the world right now. But enough about that crap. Let's go into some questions here. Travis in Plano asks, have you contacted the Innocence Project? It's pretty obvious Brandon is completely innocent. Travis, we think so too.
Well, I mean, obviously that's the whole reason we're doing this season of the podcast. As we move on to other seasons, season 2, season 3, etc. Of course, we're going to cover people that we believe to be innocent. That's kind of our niche. Of course, there's other podcasts out there that cover cases where the person may or may not be innocent, or probably is or is guilty. But our niche is covering the cases of people that are innocent. So yeah, of course we believe he's innocent. The question is a really good question. It's actually a question that I get asked quite often, and all I can tell you is I'm not really part of Brandon's family. I'm not part of his legal team. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an investigator. I'm just a guy doing a podcast that believes in his innocence, trying to get his case out there. So while I am aware of certain things that have been done, I'm not really privy to the inside information, but I do know that they have contacted, his family has contacted the Innocence Project, and that what I heard was that they basically said, come back to us when all of his appeals are exhausted. And the problem with the Innocence Project is that they only really deal in cases where DNA evidence is going to be what sets the person free. Cases like Brandon's, where there's not DNA evidence and it's just basically a culmination of all of the information when you finally realize, that he's innocent. It's cases like that that they don't really take on very often. They do, and it happens every once in a while, but they don't do it on a constant or a frequent basis. So they really, really, really have to believe in someone's innocence to put in the man hours that it takes to deal with a case like this. A case that has DNA evidence, for example, Darlie Routier's case. I don't know how many people are familiar with Darlie Routier. Probably a lot more here in Dallas-Fort Worth than outside the city. But the big push right now on her case is trying to get some DNA that they had tested, and they've been pushing for I think 10 years to get that DNA tested. But that's something that the Innocence Project would take on. Now, with that said, it would be awesome if something like this, like the podcast or the documentary, if someone in the Innocence Project outer circle or inner circle, I should say, saw the podcast or saw the documentary or heard the podcast and was like, wow, that's a case that, we believe that guy's innocent, so let's cover it. That's definitely something that would be a goal of this podcast, is to get someone in the legal community that would love to put in some pro bono work, because Brandon's grandmother is the one funding all of the legal activities, and she's quickly running out of money, if not has run out of money. So, but that's pretty much the answer to that.
Or our many, many new listeners can email the hell out of them until they're tired of seeing it.
That would be awesome.
Persistence does work, ladies and gentlemen.
Maybe we should
truly
put
does work.
We should put the email link on below in the description.
I think that's a very good idea. There's a lot of people sitting at home, don't have a whole lot to do right now. Bug the crap out of the Innocence Project. That's a great part-time job for some of you, and we condone it.
Well, and the other thing also is, he does have an attorney right now that's representing him to file the writ of actual innocence. They're in the middle of doing an investigation and preparing that writ. So I'm not 100% sure kind of what the how cooperative they would be to accepting outside help. So I don't know if it's one of those things where they're like, nah, hey, don't worry about it, we got this. Or if they're like, yeah, the more the merrier, come on, So again, I'm not privy to that information, but you would think that the more people involved, especially on the legal side, the better. But, you never know.
All right, Travis from Plano, Texas. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you, Travis.
Thank you very much for listening.
Yes.
Let's see here. Do we want to? I'll tell you what. Let's take. And this is another question from Plano. This is Debbie. Good old Debbie. Debbie's been with us for a few episodes now.
Hi, Debbie.
She hits us up. She hits us up every week. So Debbie from Plano asks, I guess I don't understand why his phone records weren't enough of an alibi, even if they were incomplete.
Well, that's one of the things that we started to touch on in this episode. So I appreciate that question. We will get into it a lot more in next week's episode, but the biggest thing about it is that the phone records didn't come back, or they didn't get them until like May or June, I think, of 2006. So Brandon had already been in jail for 6, 7, 8 months by that point. So it's one of those things where if you're Ranger Collins, you've got a guy that's in jail for capital murder for 6 or 7 months, and you look at the phone records and you think to yourself, okay, well, this may show that he was at the places that he said he was, or this may be in the general time frame, but that still doesn't mean anything. He's still guilty. I still got the right guy. So the problem is that the phone records will not actually 100% prove that he didn't do it because of something that's missing. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but let's just say that if the police and if the investigators, if the state had done their job correctly, Brandon would not be sitting in prison. And there's kind of two sides to that. There's, I'll just go ahead and say there's some phone records that are missing. And the problem with it is that if they're just quote unquote missing, if they just didn't get them for some reason, then why didn't they notice that they were missing and go back and get them? Number one. Number two, the other and more kind of sinister, nefarious view of that would be that the phone records were there, and for some reason, they were not turned over to the defense. So, again, we'll get into that next week, and you really, really, really want to watch that episode or listen to that episode to see where all of that goes, because it's a huge, huge deal. And so that's the biggest thing about it, is that's why the phone records are kind of, they could help, they could not help. It just depends on what's there.
Okay, Debbie from Plano, thanks again for your question. I hope the answer was sufficient enough for you. Thank you for listening so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Debbie.
All right, we're gonna cut to a quick word from our sponsor, and we will be right back.
C. Derick Miller is an author, producer, and gonzo journalist from the conservative community of Greenville, Texas. Sam Cloud Miller is a graphic artist and a liberal civil rights activist from Austin, Texas. Combine those two, and what do you have? Magic. Recorded in the Bishop Arts District of Dallas, it's a podcast that is sure to never disappoint. They talk about books, film, music, today's topics, and life in general. Even though they may disagree on the topics from time to time, they'll always kiss and make up. It's a practice that America needs to relearn, don't you think? No filters, no scripts, and no schedule. Catch the Butterflies Make Me Angry podcast on Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. Peace to the peaceful, truth to the masses, hell to the tyrants. Get all the details at cderickmiller.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the American Justice Podcast Q&A for Episode 7, The Force Awakens. You thought I was going to skip it, didn't you?
I thought you were going to skip it. I was like, I was going to wait till the very end and then bring it up, but good job.
You're welcome. Okay, this our last question for the week, and I chose this question because not only was it articulate, but it's very interesting. This last question comes from Charlie in Los Angeles, California.
Los Angeles.
West Coast, Best Coast. Gotta love L.A. I know it's hell out there right now. Hell-A. But I actually lived out there for a little while. Totally different world.
Yeah, LA is
totally
awesome.
Different world. Okay, yeah, that's right. You're from San Diego. You're from San Diego, so I'm sure you've been there a lot.
Not as awesome as San Diego, but it's awesome.
Okay, here we go. Listening to the different interviews with the siblings clearly sounds like the investigators were being much, dare I say, sweeter with Charla. At that point in the investigation, there was no evidence pointing to either of them. Either the investigators already had it in for Brandon, or they were drooling over Charla. I mean, we can't see the investigators' faces in the video, so the possibilities are endless. We know she was studying law enforcement in college. Did she ever become a cop? And do you think there are any recorded instances of either Collins or Jones calling in any favors to help her along in her career?
Well, thank you, Charlie from Los Angeles. Um, I think that I can answer the second part of the question first because that's the easier part. I don't know of any favors that were called in. I have heard rumors, but I can't really repeat those rumors because they're not confirmed. I will say this though. Given Charla's psychiatric background, and it seems to me that it would be very difficult for a law enforcement company or law enforcement agency to give her a gun and a badge. But we are talking about, Arkansas and the kind of the good old boy, and I'll look the other way. So she did become a police officer. She was a detective, I believe. I don't remember the agency. I haven't really looked into it that much. I actually have put that on my to-do list to find out what agency it was and see if I could go talk to some of those people and see exactly how they did give her a badge and a gun. But
Right?
I mean, they got to have some answers, right? There's got to be some way that somebody was thinking something. But anyway, so yeah, that's the answer to that question. I don't know that they called in any favors. I don't even know if Ranger Collins or Terry Jones or any of the other investigators would even have any people that they know in Arkansas. That's they're all Texas people from everything that I know about them. But it's possible, of course. But like I said, I don't know that, so I'm not going to say that. But it is kind of suspicious as to how she was able to get certified as a peace officer. As far as the first part of the question, Ranger Collins definitely came into Brandon's interrogation with an agenda, and the reason, and it wasn't like he just decided, okay, well, Brandon's a bad guy, and I'm just going to prove that he did it. He had been hearing rumors through his investigation that his family was saying that Brandon said that he went back to college about 7 o'clock. He left the Royce City house, went back to college at 7 o'clock. And then he has this neighbor, Randall Luns, that he interviews. And Randall Luns comes around and says, I actually saw Brandon at the Heath house between 10 and 11. And he's pretty insistent on the time because apparently his routine is that he, as soon as the 10 o'clock news comes on, he starts, getting his routine, going to bed and brushing his teeth and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden he lays down in bed and he hears commotion next door. He looks out the window and sees that it's Brandon. So he knows that it's between 10 and 11 p.m. So Ranger Collins, if you think about it from his point of view, his family's saying that Brandon said he went back to college at 7 o'clock. The next door neighbor's saying that they saw Brandon at 10 o'clock. So I can understand how Ranger Collins thinks, okay, he's lying to somebody, right? He's not telling somebody the truth. Either he's not telling the family the truth or he's not telling, something's going on there. So he definitely came into that interrogation with an agenda to get that question answered. Where were you? What time were you there? And what did you do? And as we talked about last week, Brandon tells Ranger Collins everywhere that he went, with the exception of the horse barn. Apparently he just forgot to tell him that, but which is kind of funny because if he would have remembered, it would have actually helped Brandon. So you can't really say that he didn't tell him on purpose. But so every place that he told Ranger Collins that he went to, he went to. There was no question about it. You know, he said he left the Roy City house. He said he went to the Heath house. Well, there was no question that he went there because, you know, Randall Lund saw him. And then he said he went to Denny's. Everybody, Robert and his girlfriend and all those people said they met him at Denny's. He went over to Alex's house to get ready to go to the club. Alex comes in and says, yeah, he came over to my house and we got ready for the club. Then he said he went to the club, and, you know, Alex said, yeah, we all went to the club. So every place that he went was verified, independently verified. And the problem is that he just, you know, from the time that he left the Roy City house to the time that he met up with Robert at the Denny's, he just really wasn't sure about what times he did everything. You know, he went to the horse barn and may have spent a half hour there, may have spent an hour there. He doesn't know. And then he went over to the Heath house and he had to let the bird out and he had to play with the bird for a little while and feed the dogs and feed the cats. And, you know, he may have been there. He said he was there for 30 minutes, and that may be his recollection. He may have been there for 30 minutes, but he may have been there for an hour, hour and a half. Who knows? You know, that time in between is just, you know, that's why I say in the episode, I'm like, I really wish that Ranger Collins would have said, you know what? Okay, so here's where you say you are. How about we go check out the phone records and we see where the phone records show that you were, and then we'll determine whether or not you're telling us the truth, right? But you never know what somebody's motivation in telling family may be. You know, for example, what if Brandon didn't even go to the Heath house? What if he went directly from the Roy City house to the gay club, right? Well, he's not going to want to tell his family that he went to the gay club because at that point he's still hiding his sexuality. So what if he...
Right, yeah.
So what if he said, you know, I went back to ACU at 7 o'clock when I left the Roy City house to his aunt and to his grandmother and all those people just because he didn't want to tell them that he was going out to a gay club, you know? So, you know, but when he comes in and talks to Ranger Collins, I think the biggest point is that he went to all the places that he said that he went to. And it wasn't like he was, and one of the things that Katie Ferguson says, it's an awesome quote. She said, you know, it's not like he told them that he went to ABC and he really went to XYZ. You know, it's like he told them he went to S4, he went to S4. He told them he met up at Denny's, he met up at Denny's. He told, you know, he wasn't hiding anything about where he was that night. The only problem was that he was just off on his time. And, you know, to be arrested and convicted of capital murder because somebody makes it out that, you know, that you're just this liar or this mastermind, this cold-blooded killer because you're off on your times for an hour or two. I mean, if that were the case, every person that was ever questioned would probably be in prison for life, you know? But the biggest thing is, and as we get into next week's episode, is really we're going to dive into the forensics, and we're going to not only prove where Brandon was that night, but we're going to finally get down to the nitty-gritty about the time that he had to commit the murders. Even if, I mean, what if Brandon would have said, you know, hey, I went back to Abilene at 7, and he stuck with that story for Ranger Collins as well. You know, what would matter more, what he said or the forensics and what they show? And that's kind of the biggest point in this case is, you know, I can't believe that Ranger Collins would arrest somebody for capital murder just because even if he thinks they're lying about their timeline, even if he thinks, you know, okay, this guy is sitting here bold-faced lying to me about where he went. Why would you arrest somebody just because of that? Don't you think you need to have some other evidence? Don't you think you need to have some physical evidence, you know, something else pointing to the fact that he was at the house murdering his parents? So that's the biggest thing for me is just like, I can't believe shoddy investigation, and just the fact that Brandon was arrested 5 days or 6 days after the bodies were found, and then 72% of the investigation was done after he was arrested. That just goes to show the bias from Ranger Collins. And I don't mean to go off on a tirade here, but this is probably the number one frustrating thing about this case is how Ranger Collins can put somebody in jail for the rest of their life because they were off on a couple hours on their timeline. I mean, it's just flabbergasting.
Well, I would love for him to come on this show and explain his reasoning for doing so, because he's listening.
I know he's listening. Yeah, absolutely.
He has to be listening, because I know people from the Hunt County Sheriff's Office listen to this podcast, and they're all connected. They all talk.
Yeah.
So I'm certain that he listens week to week and gets giddy every time we mention his name. But
he gets giddy a lot then.
But I would love for him to come on this podcast and defend his reasoning. Mm-hmm. Help us understand. And the same thing with Charla, the same thing with Mike, the same thing with anybody. Now, we're not going to get Terry Jones on here. I can tell you right now. Terry Jones, I've known Terry Jones personally for a very, very long time. And when I say very, very long time, I'm talking 30 plus years. I knew him as a child. I worked with him at the Hunt County Sheriff's Department. He recently won the primary, the Republican nomination for the sheriff in Hunt County. So come January 1st, he will be Sheriff Terry Jones. So I don't believe we'll ever get him on here.
Well, it's a good thing I'm not living in Hunt County.
Yeah, but I invite that. I would love for Terry to come on here and give us some of his reasoning, since he was an investigator on this case. So that would be great. We welcome it.
Absolutely.
We're trying to understand this ourselves, and these people could help us do that.
Absolutely.
And help our listeners in the process. Well, that does it for this week. We had we had more than 3 questions, but we narrowed it down to 3 questions. Of course, that last one was my favorite, so we kept that one.
Hey,
we thank everybody for watching.
Hold on just a second. Let me say one last thing about that. I don't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No. Hey, it's your world, baby. I'm just living in it.
Well, something that just something that just popped into my mind is, when this coming week, we're going to hopefully finish Brandon's interrogation. I still have yet to do the final edits on it, but I'm in the middle of it. We may spill into another week. I don't know. There's a lot about Brandon's timeline and this interrogation. But when we get through that, whether it's this week or this coming week or next week, we will get into the arrest warrant. And we're going to spend a lot of time on the arrest warrant. Don't get me wrong. It's not like Ranger Collins just made out an arrest warrant that said, Brandon lied to me, I'm going to arrest him. There's more stuff in the arrest warrant, but as you'll see, it's stuff like that you just would never think would be in an arrest warrant. Like, Mike said that Brandon threw a cat over a bridge. I mean, it's stuff like that, and you're not going to want to miss this, because at the end of that arrest warrant, you are going to sit there and think to yourself, how in the hell did any judge sign off on this arrest warrant? And so stay tuned for that. It's going to be a good episode.
I can't wait. I can't wait. All right, two things I want to end out on today. Number 1, ladies and gentlemen, we need your help with this. At some point, this season is going to end. The Brandon Woodruff season will come to a close. The case may not, but the season of the American Justice Podcast will come to a close, and we need your help moving on. We're going to spend the second season talking about someone entirely new, and that's going to require research and writing and everything else. So we need to get a little bit of a jump on it, of course, after we take a little break. I think we're due a little break after the first season.
Yes.
But if you know someone that is wrongfully imprisoned for a crime they did not commit, and you would like their case discussed for a potential for a season on this show, please email us at info@americanjusticepodcast.com. We would love to have your suggestions on that.
Absolutely.
Number 2, if you're not watching our YouTube channel, you are missing out. Whereas on the podcast side of things, if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher, we have videos that accompany the interrogations or the interviews. We'll call them interviews at this point. But we have the actual videos themselves on the YouTube channel during the episode. So if you're not a part of our YouTube channel, you're missing out. And what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to get 100 subscribers to our YouTube channel so we can give it a cute little name and all.
A custom URL, they call it.
Yeah, a custom URL. Right. Well, we've got something for you. Down in the description of this video here, you will find the instructions and a link. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel and you do everything we ask of you down in the description of this video, you will go into a drawing. The first 100 of you will go into a drawing for a $500 Visa gift card.
That's right.
So we know a lot of people out there could use $500 right now. I'm one of them, but
Are you going to subscribe?
I will subscribe. I'm going to try and beat everybody out for it. But yeah, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You get a lot more content there. I mean, continue to listen on Stitcher and Spotify and all that. But also the YouTube channel, you're going to get to see things that you wouldn't get to see just by listening to the podcast episode. So yeah, subscribe to our YouTube channel. I think I mean, if you're watching this, you know what the YouTube channel is. follow the instructions down in the video description, and we'll put you in a drawing for a $500 Visa gift card.
You know, we do put the Q&A episodes up on Stitcher and Apple Podcasts and stuff, so they could be listening to us right now. So I'll try to put the link and all that stuff in the description of the podcast as well. So hopefully wherever they're listening to us or watching us, they'll have the links and all that in the description.
Excellent. Also, to find out more about the Brandon Woodruff case and the upcoming documentary, you can go to freebrandon.org. Lots of good stuff to read there. I guess that's all I have for this week, Scott.
That's all we got.
Unless you have anything else you'd like to add.
That, I think, is that'll do it.
All right. Well, I'm your co-host, C. Derick Miller. You can find out more about me and my books and everything else at cderickmiller.com. Also, you can listen to the Butterflies Make Me Angry podcast, where we introduce an indie author. We read the first chapter of their book and leave it up to you, the listener, to decide whether or not you want to finish.
What was
quite
your
interesting.
What was your book last week or this week?
Let's see. The one that we're going to release this week is an author from Oklahoma. Actually, I don't think he's from Oklahoma. I think he just lives in Oklahoma now. I think he is actually from Uncertain, Texas. Uncertain, Texas is a town in far east Texas, almost to the Louisiana border. It sits on Caddo Lake. When I think maybe only 70 people live there, but when they applied for township, they didn't know what they were going to call it. So on the application, they just put uncertain, and that's what the state of Texas gave them as a name for their town. It's an actual place. There was a documentary film done about that town not too long ago.
Oh, nice.
But the author's name is Wile E. Young, almost like Wile E. Coyote. Wile E. Young. And it is the first of a splatter western series, which is extreme horror mixed with a western. This is not your daddy's Louis L'Amour book, I'll tell you that. But it's the first of many that the publisher Death's Head Press is going to be putting out throughout the remainder of this year. And let me tell you, they came out of the gate strong. I read a lot, and this is the best book I've read all year so far. It may be the best book that I've read in the last couple of years. It's a novella, so it's a quick read. You know, you can finish it in maybe 6 or 7 hours, no big deal. But just an amazing book, especially if you're into horror or you're into westerns. Either one, this book is going to please you. We're going to read the first chapter this week on the Butterflies Make Me Angry podcast. So
Nice.
If you're into that kind of thing, you might want to listen.
And the link will be in the description.
Yes, the link will be in the description. So let's knock out that tagline, Scott. On 3, 1, 2, 3.
Stay aware. Stay strong.
Stay strong.
And get
And
involved.
get involved. We'll see you guys next week after episode 8.
The American Justice Podcast is owned and copyrighted by Atua Productions, LLC. Your host is Scott Pogensey, and your writer is C. Derick Miller. The theme music for the American Justice Podcast has been created and composed by Josh DeRosa. Scripted and recorded episodes are published every Sunday morning, with follow-up Q&A episodes released on Fridays. You can find the Q&A episodes on YouTube by searching for American Justice Podcast. Atua Productions aims for this to be an interactive podcast where you, the audience, has a great amount of influence on the content of our shows. You can interact with us in several ways. First, and most preferred, is you can leave us a voicemail. Our phone number is 972-942-0444. Be sure to leave your name and the city you're calling from, along with whether or not we can use your voice on the air. If Facebook is more your style, you can log on to our Facebook page at facebook.com/American Justice Podcast. Feel free to leave a comment, or you can message us on Messenger if you have a more pressing question or issue. If you would like to blog about the show, then you can log on to AmericanJusticePodcast.com and tell us what you think there. You can find many of the documents discussed in this episode there as well. If you are a tweeter, you can also voice your opinion on Twitter at @AJusticePodcast. If you would like to support the show, you can do so in a couple different ways. First, consider visiting our Patreon page at patreon.com/AJPodcast. We have different levels of support that include t-shirts, guest call-in spots, and early access to our podcast and YouTube shows. Next, you can like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get notifications of when we publish episodes. We would also very much appreciate it if you could give us a 5-star review. If you have any comments about the show, or more importantly, any tips on the case we're discussing, please call 972-942-0444 and leave us a message. After all, if the subject of our podcast is innocent, that means someone out there is guilty. American Justice Army? Let's find them.